You guys, I tried. But this episode it's coming out late because I tried to record this episode in the airport and then in a plane. And you know what? Let me just play a tiny bit of how that went so you can understand why this episode's going to be a little bit strange, which is perfect for the 100th episode of Created Worthy because Weird is basically my non-existent middle name. So, yeah, just hear this.
And then I was home walking today that's providing some light and looking out of one lid on the city stand, impacting on elbow.
If you had no idea what that said, me neither. Yeah. All I can say is that I do not recommend trying to record a podcast on a plane. Now, the airport, I was able to get about half of the podcast done. So that's what you're going to hear is the first half in the Nashville airport and the second half today in my home, a day, 2 days late because I needed to rest. So without further ado, welcome. Actually, I just learned it's not further or do, it's further ado, which I might have sounded like I said that, but please someone message me and tell me if you also thought it was further or do and not further ado. Anyways, welcome to the 100th official episode of the Created Worthy podcast. Let's get started. Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the 100th episode of Created Worthy. Technically, we've recorded a few more episodes than 100, but as far as official episode count goes, this is episode 100, and I am so grateful that you are here. Today, I'm recording from Nashville Airport. I am on my way home from our first in-person Heart Soul Strength board meeting, and we just wanted to stay consistent. And so here I am. If you're on YouTube, you'll see I am truly, I'm going to turn the camera around, but we've got gates in front of us. Right outside of gate C15, there's a nice little booth and tables set up. I'm tucked in by the Admirals Club. So if there is some announcements, then we're just going to roll with it. But I'm just so honored to be recording this episode. And I can hardly believe that we've reached this incredible mile. What started as a space for open and honest conversations has become something so much bigger. It's become a movement of people embracing their stories and stepping into the truth that they and you really are created worthy. I want to thank you for being here. Whether you've listened to all episodes, all 100 episodes, or this is your first one, your support, your feedback, and your encouragement has kept me going. And to my guests, your vulnerability and courage have brought this podcast to life. You are what this podcast is all about, honoring and sharing your stories. So let's celebrate by revisiting the transformative conversations that made season 5 so special. Season 5 was full of powerful moments. The guests this season shared their hearts in ways that I know have left a lasting impact on me and probably you too.
As we listen to these stories today, I just want to invite you to do a little creative processing exercise with me. If you're in your car, do it mentally. If you're somewhere else that you can use your phone notes, then use your phone notes. But I just want you to set your intention as we listen to this episode. And if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see this prompt on the screen. So, the purpose of episode 100 of Created Worthy, and you can just say CW episode 100, however you want to say it, the purpose of listening to this episode is to process the impact of the stories shared. The impact of life stories is to process testimonies. However you want to phrase it, set an intention. And let me remind you that creative processing is so simple. It's simply activating your creative mind, which you're doing by listening to storytelling in these episodes, to process a certain intention, which you get to shape, you get to choose. The one I am proposing to you is the purpose of listening to this episode is to process life stories. And at the end of this, whether you just take 2 minutes to think through it or a couple minutes to journal about it, I'm going to challenge you to write down 3 things that you learned from these stories that are shared. Maybe it's something that stuck with you, or it's a perspective that challenged you, or maybe it's a breakthrough that you experienced by listening to these.
Let's start by revisiting the first few conversations that set the tone for this season. Our first guest was Tracy O'Malley in episode 81, How to Stop White Knuckling Your Healing, an Enneagram 8 Silent Journey to Divine Activation. Tracy is a master performance coach and Enneagram expert who knows the power of owning your story. Her journey of overcoming silence and stepping into healing is a reminder to all of us to embrace the parts of our stories we may want to hide.
And this is for the woman that's listening right now that thinks there are parts of their story that they keep under lock and key disqualifies them, because I did that for 40 years. The parts of my story that I'll very openly share now were the ones that I kept under lock and key because I felt like they disqualified me for stepping into the legend that I know that I was always designed to be. So I want you to kind of listen and hear parts of yourself in this story, because we're all very similar. I mean, the experiences might look a little bit different, but kind of what we believe about our story is very true for a lot of us, especially women.
Next, in episode 82, No Pain is Wasted, Trusting God with the Outcome of the Unknown, we welcomed my sweet friend, Baylor Knott. Baylor's faith filled perspective on trusting God through life's uncertainties is a powerful reminder that his plans for us are always for our good.
The outcome that God has for you, if it's different than the one that you have in mind, it's different because it's better.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And that I want to be sensitive to that, because I know a lot of times it's easy to look at someone who got the outcome she wanted all along and be like, oh, it's easy for you to say that God is good now because look, you got what you wanted. But I think for me, what I remind myself of is that God was good before the outcome. And God showed me his goodness before the outcome arrived. And so I think sometimes we have in mind, everybody does, right? A plan for our lives and a way that we want our lives to go. And then when life inevitably veers off of the course that we charted, it's easy to throw our hands up and be like, God, what are you doing up there?
And in episode 83, Driven by Performance, Created for Connection, Jen Weaver shared her journey of shifting from a performance based relationship with God to one rooted in true connection. Her story is a beautiful reflection of God's unwavering love. Let's hear from her.
I need to show God that I'm worth saving. Like he did all this for me. I'm worth it. I'm going to work really hard for you. I'm going to try and do things that you would want me to do. Like you want me to perform well. And I wouldn't have had all of the vocabulary for it at the time. I still would have called it relationship, but what I had called relationship was really more like he was my boss or he was Almighty God that I hoped was happy enough with me that someday I would actually make it into heaven. Like it was very job performance-y. And starting to change that really was peeling away these misunderstandings that I had about his care for me. Because at the core of it, because I grew up in the church, I'd always been part of like outreach. I'd always been part of let's invite our friends who don't know God. And so I had picked up these, I call them lesser stories. I picked up these broken perspectives about God and these broken perspectives about me, these lesser stories along the way.
These first 3 episodes highlight something so important: the power of vulnerability. When we share our struggles and truths, we create space for connection and healing. Tracy, Baylor, and Jen remind us that it's okay to not have it all together and that our worth is not tied to our performance. This theme carries throughout the rest of season 5 as well, so let's keep going. So, by the middle of this season, we were brought even more incredible stories of resilience, healing, and growth. In episode 84, From Survival to Success: How One Woman Transformed Pain into Resilience, Carrie Taft showed us how she creates spaces for others to feel seen and valued through movement first, and now connection and building businesses. Her story shows the power of community, of overcoming challenges, and having empathy with others, even those challenging clients.
One thing I know in the deep of my core is that I am meant to help others.
Mhm.
And the best way I knew how to do that was to help others feel good about themselves through movement, through dance, through exercise, allowing them to come into a space for 1 hour where they feel seen, they feel that they matter, they can let their guard down, because you don't know what people are going through in their lives. Someone could sit in front of you and smile and be the happiest person, and they go home and maybe they have an abusive partner, or maybe they have an alcoholic parent, or maybe they're living in shambles or something, and you have no idea about it. So I vowed to make it my personal vendetta to make sure everyone who came there felt seen and important and like they mattered, and that, okay, yes, they're paying me, but guess what? They're actually paying themselves. They're investing in themselves. I'm just a vessel helping them.
Next, Kayla Yoder joined us for episode 85, The Transformational Power of God's Timing. Kayla's story of surrender and faith in the midst of loss reminds us that God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't make any sense to us.
And I remember just telling God, fine, if you're going to take her, then you have to start answering all my questions. Like, you have to be there for me no matter what. He was like, been waiting for this, daughter. What have you been doing?
Yeah.
And after I did that, everything has just grown so exponentially in a way that it's made other people curious about what's different. And they'll ask, I remember soon after my mom passed, they're like, how are you not just curled up in a ball wanting to just cry all day long? And I was like, oh, I would love to do that. That would be amazing. But God is still good and He has
Right.
carried me through. Look at all that He's still provided. He is the one holding me together.
And in episode 86, A Pinterest Pioneer's Journey to Success, Jen Vasquez shares her entrepreneurial journey and practical wisdom of balancing work with self care, something I think all of us could use a few more reminders of. Her story reminds us to give ourselves permission to rest and reset. Let's hear from Jen.
Sometimes I will, in the middle of the day, say, I'm done. And I will go lay down in bed, close my eyes, and just listen to a book. It like resets me. So, this is
Yeah.
your permission out there, if you're listening to this, to change things up if it's not working for you and to add some variety if you are not getting from it what you got from it before.
As I reflect on these episodes, I'm reminded of the moments behind the microphone, before we pressed record or after we pressed record. The laughter, the tears, the powerful connections made during those conversations. Some of my most memorable moments this season were spent talking and telling stories and praying with my guests. This podcast has taught me that the most impactful moments often come from the stories we least expect. So, with that being said, let's just keep going with more wisdom, more stories of resilience, and more reminders of God's goodness. So, in episode 87, The Bell Curves of Life, Creating Joy in the Midst of Hard Seasons, Liz Cobo reminded us that life is not a straight path. Her perspective on finding joy in the ups and downs is a beautiful encouragement for all of us. Let's take a listen back at Liz's episode.
Life didn't end up taking that sort of straight linear path. It's really more a bunch of bell curves, right? You go high, you go low,
Yes.
and up and down. And there's this old movie from, I think from the 90s called Parenthood with Steve Martin. And it talks about life being like a roller coaster where you go up and down, and sometimes you go around in a loop. And that definitely feels that was my path. It wasn't a straight line through the things I thought I would do, and by certain dates didn't work out, but God had always a better plan than I could have come up with.
Kim Anderson joined us for episode 88, Discovering the Healing Power of Creative Processing. Her insights on how creativity aids healing were so inspiring and confirming, especially for anyone navigating the ups and downs of personal growth. Let's hear a clip of Kim's episode.
I think it's important to call this out too, because there have been people that have come across my path and been like, "What are you? What do you mean you're healing? Like, is something wrong?" And just because you're healing doesn't mean that something's wrong. I'm just trying to become the most whole version of myself.
Right.
And
So good.
we, because of everything that's placed on us from the time that we're born, even before that, we have to, it's just like becoming who I fully am is what healing means to me.
I stinking love that lady. I love all of my guests, but Kim is on my mind because I have not replied to her voice memo. So Kim, if you are listening to this, please know you are on my heart and on my mind. And I have been so inspired by your story. I think about it often. And I am sorry, I'm a horrible texter. Anyways, moving right along. Season 5 also marked the launch of Heart, Soul, Strength, our ministry. I am still in shock that we launched a ministry and a nonprofit in the last couple of months. So we had a bonus episode called Leaders, It's Time to Rise. And this ministry was born from the desire to care for and equip leaders to lead with all of their heart, with all of their soul, and with all of their strength, based on Deuteronomy 6:4. 4:6. I might be dyslexic. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it's 6:4, but it might be 4:6. I'm going to leave this in here, but it's Deuteronomy in there. One of those two. Anyways, here's a snippet from that exciting announcement.
Whether you're a stay-at-home mom or you are a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, my friend, you are doing kingdom work. If God has called you into that role, then He is equipping you for it. He has equipped you for it, and He will continue equipping you for it. And that's where heart, soul, and strength comes from. I believe that this ministry has been called to rise up truly from nothing into something that fills the need of caring for leaders' hearts and for equipping leaders with what they need to lead with all of their heart, soul, and strength.
In episode 89, the now 9-year-old podcaster is back. My daughter, Gabriella Joy, joined me to talk about creative processing in the purest, most joyful way. We may not have had our hair brushed, but we had love in our hearts, so that's all that really matters, right? Here is a clip from Ella's episode. I'm going to clean my room to process my gratitude, because as you pick up each and everything in your room, that can be a physical reminder of something to be grateful for. So What is your favorite creative processing method?
Drawing.
Drawing? When do you most use drawing? Do you draw at school during?
Yeah.
Yeah,
During class.
you do?
Yeah.
Does that help you to think better about what you're learning
Yeah.
sometimes?
Yeah, but sometimes I get in trouble.
I love her. My audio might sound a little bit different because if you heard in the beginning, I am now back at home. So this is being recorded 2 days later. And you know what? I just felt like this would be a really good time to reflect for a moment. Since I'm interrupting the audio anyways, I just want to take a moment to look back at all of these episodes and just one, express my gratitude. Yes, of course, for the incredible, courageous women who have showed up to share their story on here, but also just for the community, for every single text that I've gotten from someone that's like, oh my gosh, I felt like I was sitting in the room with you, or I related so much to Leah's story, or Rachel's story, or Holly's story, or Claire's story. Those messages are what truly helped me to continue to fulfill this call on my life in this season. Because if you guys weren't showing up and saying, I'm ready to share my story, then Created Worthy would not exist. So thank you to every single one of you. And if you, my friend, are listening and you would like to share your story, you are feeling that prompting of sharing your story, you do not have to have arrived to share testimonies of what God has done in your life. You know this, but the enemy loves to lie to us and tell us that we aren't allowed or we're not ready to share the story or miracle of when you got pregnant or when you made it out of a situation you thought you would never be able to make it out of. Recently, we've started keeping a list. Thanks, Rachel. I would have probably never done this, but we started keeping a list of the number of times that I've faced a near-death experience. I think we're up to like 16 or something currently. But I don't even think of those stories to necessarily share publicly because they're just part of the mundane, in my opinion, of my own life. So I just want to make sure that that is really clear that no one of us has arrived. When we arrive, that means we're dead in the ground. We're dead in the ground. That's when we've arrived. You can share testimonies that are a part of an isolated time in your life, or you can share a summed up version of your entire story. The only thing I ask from my guests is that they make sure that they are feeling called to share their story. That is the number one and pretty much only requirement. If you are feeling called to share your story, then that's why this platform exists, is to help you to share that, whether it just serves as a part of your own healing process or you're feeling called to share it because you know that other people are going to benefit from hearing the experiences that you've gone through and it helping them to feel inspired to walk through their own challenges. Our stories really are the most powerful tool of connection that we have. I don't believe that God has written our stories in ways that we're supposed to keep silent forever. We really are created for community. So if you are feeling that call, then feel free to grab the link in the show notes to apply to be a guest. We do just have a simple application that just gives us an idea of where you're at in your life and story. And the only reason we do that now is because this is also a platform that we are called to steward and hold safe space. So, in an effort to make sure that your stories are being shared in a way that feels honored and honorable, we have implemented this application. And if you feel called, please fill it out. We will be opening a few more guest spots for season 6. Season 6 is already filling up. We have some stories that you've probably heard of before, but maybe haven't heard from their own mouths that are lined up for season 6. And we just know that God is doing something incredible with our testimonies. So I am super grateful for you guys. And yeah, let's keep going to the second half of the season. So in episode 90, Creating Alignments and Redefining Success, Claire Darr shared her journey of finding alignment in her life and redefining what success really means. Her reflections are a reminder to stay true to ourselves. Let's hear a word from Claire Darr.
I was
running on empty. I was running on adrenaline and cortisol. I was in adrenal fatigue. I had serious health issues that still are with me. I've
Mhm.
not, and yet I showed up in 3-inch heels, a suit that was perfectly coordinated, with a smile, with my act together, not letting anyone down.
Mm.
And it was all hidden under the surface. And so, what you say on reflection, that's one of the things that really is always in my mind when I'm meeting with people and working with people. You might not know you're in burnout.
Next up was Sharita Harkness. Sharita brought so much wisdom in episode 91, Purpose in Pivots. Her story shows the beauty of embracing change and trusting the process of life's transitions.
Sometimes the miracle is me. Sometimes the miracle is that I got out of bed this morning.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know what could have happened to me. Sometimes the miracle is I can appreciate, like, just the fact that I can see color. I can see a sunrise. I was looking to the left or right because there's a window that's right
Yeah.
outside. My miracle is even in my house. Like, I used to dream that I would have a room that I could write in, like, just for writing, because all the writers that I admire, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, these women had writing rooms, and Virginia Woolf, they had their own space for writing. And I just thought, oh God, one day. And I have it, right? And yet there's been times I've sat in this very room and thought, oh, there's nothing magical about what I'm doing today. And that's not true, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's just recognizing magic is in little things. Fairy dust comes out, pixie dust from Tinkerbell is quite small. So it has to
Mhm.
like fall on little things, right?
In episode 92, Radical Obedience and Resilience, Elise Hurd shared the importance of safe spaces and truth telling as the first steps towards healing. Her message is one of hope and courage. Let's hear a little bit from Elise.
One of the first things that's needed is a safe, loving space where you can fully tell the truth about what has happened to you, what is happening inside of you. And so that confession process, in terms of telling the truth to someone fully in a safe space, is so important. That's a hard thing to find. But that is an important first step towards freedom. I would say
Yeah.
pray about, I would say ask God to highlight to you someone that you can share what has happened to you, what is going on within you, and then be really honest about it.
Allison Smith's two-part series in episodes 93 and 94, titled Healing Out Loud from Narcissistic Abuse and Religious Trauma, and Carjacked, Kidnapped, and Almost Toast, was a real, raw, and deeply moving story of survival and resilience. And it's one that I will never, ever forget.
Any impact that I have on this world is to make those places where we can get real, we can get raw, and we can be vulnerable without fear.
Yeah.
Because fear of rejection and fear of being unlovable and fear of real danger, whatever it is, that keeps us from all of the gifts. And so I think a huge way that we break down those walls of fear is through each other, because it's the two most comforting words in the world to hear when you hear me too, because it's okay. We connect then. That's what being a human is about to me. We share experiences. Sometimes survival isn't bringing the ship to shore. Sometimes it's hanging on to a piece of wreckage and just making it. That's what I was doing, was just day by day, moment by moment. And the fact that I was able to keep my light when so many things and people tried to snuff it out, it was a miracle, and not of my own power, but it did show me my power.
In episodes 95 and 96, Growing Up in the Spotlight and Trading the Newsroom for a New Life, Sarah Davenport shared her journey from being an anchor in Houston and growing up with a mom in media as well, to stepping into a life by design, a life of purpose beyond the spotlight and focused on her family, and now serving those who are also ready to live a life by design. Let's hear a word from Sarah.
So many people are on this hamster wheel of life and they're not getting off.
Yeah.
They're pushing off their dreams. They're just getting through the week, which, by the way, getting through the week means you're just getting through the month, which means you're just getting through the year after year after year. And some people die and their dreams are gone with them. And so when I was doing all those stories, I thought, I don't want that to ever be my story. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I want to go after my passions.
I have so many feelings every time Sarah speaks. So excited to see what God does with her life and in her business. So, as we wrap up and get to the last few recaps, I just wanted to remind you that season 6 is going to be incredible. Okay? It's a huge reminder. Season 6 is going to be incredible. I have some amazing guests lined up and new ideas to share with you. And one of the big changes going forward, which is actually not part of season 6, but now just part of the format of the show, is that while we take a short break of releasing guest episodes, because that's what our seasons consist of, I'm actually going to start releasing some weekly solo episodes that are just quick in between seasons. And my desire is that we can actually do some creative processing together. We did some polls. We've been doing some polls, so a mix of creative processing, personal development, mental health, like getting real about mental health, inviting God and creativity into it. That's what we're going to do during these short episodes that we'll do weekly now. But we're just doing that in between as we prepare for a new season, hopefully launching in, I'm so bad at math, and honestly, I didn't choose a month. Usually what we do with Created Worthy is we do 20 weeks on and 20 weeks off. But this time, during those 20 weeks, there's actually going to be content coming out. It's just not the season stories content. So we will be doing these short episodes on a weekly basis, hopefully, God willing. And then we will be back to the stories in 20 weeks from now, whenever that is. Unless God tells us to start releasing earlier. But please know that in those 20 weeks, we like to have most, if not all, of the stories recorded and ready to release so that we can focus on sharing and supporting you through the process of actually getting your story out there publicly. There is this beautiful thing that happens that can also feel really scary. I call it a vulnerability hangover. But after you share your story, a lot of times the enemy is going to attack before the story actually gets out there. So there's a supporting that we do behind the scenes as part of Created Worthy that just is helping people to know and weed out, like, is this something that is for now? And we like to have that space for you to be able to process your story and us to be able to edit it if there's something that comes up. So yeah, like I said earlier, make sure to check out the show notes and get the link to apply to be a guest. I cannot wait to continue growing and exploring with you in this next chapter of Created Worthy. Okay, let's jump into the final 3 episodes of Created Worthy, the stories that were shared this season. In episode 97, From Cuba to Canada to U.S. Immigration Lawyer, a 2-time immigrant's inspiring journey of strength and success. Giselle Carson shares her powerful story of resilience as a 2-time immigrant who built a life of service and impact.
The message was like, imagine if this can happen to a president in the United States, imagine what happens to the people that don't have that kind of protection. I mean, so in my mind, you couldn't walk around the streets by yourself. Kids couldn't go to school because they would get killed, or unless you had a huge amount of money, you couldn't do anything. I mean, I was totally brainwashed. And you don't know anything else because you don't have exposure to anything different. It's whatever, they control the media, they control everything. So any information you get is whatever they want you to know. And again, I was so brainwashed that, for me, when my mom said that to me, I was like, no way, I'm going back myself. Literally, I said that to her. I'm going to go to the embassy because I knew there was one in Montreal and ask them to take me back. And so they took turns at night making sure that I didn't escape the apartment that we were in, and that I would just go back to ask the Cuban government to take me back and leave them behind.
In episode 98, Redemption is Real, Laura Vanderveld Gabehart shares how God redeems every single part of our story, even the pieces we thought were lost forever.
Sometimes we hear from the Lord and then life takes us in different directions and we go, but I thought you said this. And sometimes we give up on that, right? And I did that at times, but God orders our steps. He knew even through my failures, my successes, my mess ups, my sin, the times where I wanted to be obedient to Him, He was ordering my steps. And He's like, look, I know where you're going to land. There comes a point where you're just like, wherever you go, there you are. And you're like, what am I going to do with this? Do I want something that's better for me, for my family, for my children? And Lord, how do you help me? I remember I felt like there was a good year of my life where I felt like the only prayer I could pray was, help me, God, help me. And it was like, I just need help. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what to do. And He's faithful to help us. He has better things for us. And He is a redeeming God. He takes those losses and failures and everything that has been stolen from us, and He gives them back in abundance. And He has good things for us. He can reshape our identity from when the enemy tries to shape it in a different way. He can reshape it and reform it and bring things to life again.
And in our final episode of season 5, episode 99, The Heart Speaks, Embracing Challenges with Courage, Holly Murray reminded us that grief and healing are lifelong journeys, but hope is always present.
The only way out of grief is through it. Yeah. There's no way out of it. You have to process it and go through it. I think there's that saying, time heals all wounds. It doesn't heal all wounds, but what happens is you learn to live without that loved one. Mm-hmm. Like, I have never experienced an adult life with my mom in my life, and that doesn't make it okay. And there are definitely times where I will cry, and sometimes at different times of the year, maybe triggers for me. And it's a lot of radical self-acceptance to not judge myself, because love has no time limit. I still love my mom. I know she still loves me. I grieve with hope because I'll see her again one day. And, 20 years down the road, it's totally different than when it was 20 minutes of dealing with it.
That was episode 99 of the Created Worthy podcast. Thank you so, so much for being here. Before we wrap this season officially, I just want to invite you to join me in the creative processing exercise that we had done at the beginning and just closing it up and wrapping a bow on it. I'd love for you to take a moment to write down 3 things that you were impacted by or learned from this season of Created Worthy and the stories that were shared here. Maybe it's a story that stuck with you. Maybe it's a perspective that challenged you, or maybe it's a breakthrough that you experienced. Just take a few minutes and journal your thoughts. And if you want to, you can share them with me on social media by tagging Created Worthy Podcast or Danielle Damrell, because I am not on social media as much these days, so the likelihood of me seeing it on Danielle Damrell is much higher. Anyways, awkward endings are still a thing for me. So I guess I'll just end it with this. Thank you so much for being here for the 100th episode and the few bonus episodes in there as well. If this is your first episode, I am so grateful that you are here. Your support means more to me than I could ever put into words. Remember, your story is worthy. Your voice matters, and you are created for a purpose by design. Until next time, my friends, stay creative, stay curious, and remember that you are created worthy. Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you, and if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. or come follow along with my personal IG page where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy. If you've stayed all the way to the end of this episode, then I'm gonna bless you with a little blooper reel.
Bloopers on video and the phone and committed to getting this episode done. So we're gonna keep it. It's me and Shane and then George. The reason I'm talking into the window is because I got a lot of sound. Oh, the no idea. If the visuals are better with what? Anything for. So looking down at all these I and the guest respond with gratitude for the guests who trusted me with their stories and for you, the listeners, and shared up to work. This podcast is more than a platform, it's a community. And I'm so
Have I figured this out yet? It's only been literally everything I've tried. So, is this mic picking up good enough sound?